So how's school today?
Good. Good.
Good. Connor, what'd you learn?
We have college week. I learned that the more education you have, the more money you make.
Great. Harrison, what did you learn?
We did an experiment in class today. I learned that as the temperature falls, warm air rises.
Very good. Grant, what did you learn as you moved your fingers?
We did. I eat glue.
You eat glue. Great. Well, Harrison, Connor, what you learned today sounds like a lesson that I taught today in school. And that sounds like inductive reasoning.
What's that?
Well, what inductive reasoning is, it's where you start with, I lost my train of thought. Where you start with an observation and then you look at the patterns that you find. Just like you were saying about the warm air, you know, as the temperature drops, the hot air goes up, right? So that's what inductive reasoning is. You make a theory or a hypothesis based on what you observed. So the thing is, this is a theory, not a fact. The conclusion can be false, even if all the things that you came up with, all the observations that you made are true. Do you know the idea, like outside, you know how we have five kittens, right?
Yeah.
And 3 of them are black, and 2 of them are black and white. We know the mom's black, right?
Yes.
And you remember that other cat, that stray male that came around, that was a black and white cat, and I said, that's the dad, yes?
Yes.
Yes, but could there have been other stray cats that could have been the dad?
Possibly.
Yeah, that's inductive reasoning. Just because 2 of the kittens are black and white, and that cat is a male, and he comes around all the time, I just inductively reasoned that that is the dad. Could any other animals have been the dad? What do you guys think?
Nope.
Yes or no? No? You don't think there could have been other stray cats?
Yeah, I did.
What do you think, Grant?
They can go dog.
You think the daddy's a dog? Harrison, what do you think about that?
I'm pretty sure that that is a false fact.
You think that's false? That's right. I think that's false too.
Well, I get it. Based on what the kittens look like, the black and white one could be the dad.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's inductive reasoning. Okay, inductive reasoning teaches us to think. But we have to be careful with inductive reasoning because that's where stereotypes come from. When we make a judgment based on past experiences with people. For example, there's a stereotype that women are bad drivers. And the cameraman does not have any lines in this skit. So, we have to be careful with inductive reasoning. Do you want to know how I would use it in a classroom?
Sure.
Yes.
Say that. Okay. I'm glad you asked. Anyways, ready?
Yeah.
In a classroom setting, our inductive reasoning would be more involved. The students would have a large group called the domain. The students would have different items and group them into categories based on what they have in common. For example, if we were in a science classroom, we might have plants. That would be our domain. The students could group the plants based on things they have in common, such as flowers, thorns, or different root systems and locations. Once they split them into groups, they could make an observation. They may observe that all plants with thorns have a certain type of root system. The students could then conclude that all plants with thorns will have the same root system. This is based on observation that they have made. We might find other thorny plants from the same area with a totally different root system. All right, the steps to inductive reasoning are, first step is collection. With this phase, we add and disregard information and items as we go along. The next phase is our examination phase. We look closely at what we collected and label it based on common attributes. Teachers have to be careful not to rush the examination phase or the study can become superficial. The next phase we have is the classifying phase. We classify once and then again. This first classification usually focuses on the big attributes. All the items have. We want to classify at least twice. The second time we tend to look closer at the items and classifying the fine details. The next phase is to build a hypothesis. This is where we really look closely at the items and usually determine a hypothesis and form a theory on what we observe. Ready? Application. One of the main goals of inductive reasoning is to develop thinking skills. It can increase productive and creative thinking in any class at any grade level. The idea of inductive reasoning is not to form proof, but to form a theory based on information collected and observed. The pros to inductive reasoning is that students come by it naturally. The students make connections and learn ideas that they may never have considered because they never took the time to observe the information. The downside is it can take a lot of time in the classroom. Students can also get confused when they realize that the conclusion they came to can actually be false, even if all the data that they collected shows that it's true. Sometimes our collections are limited, and if we bring in new items or ideas, it changes the outcome, or what we thought to be true. So boys, y'all have any questions on inductive reasoning?
Can we play video games now?
Okay, pay attention. We're going to do a lesson on inquiry reasoning. And what it is it's when you've got a group like a total, like a domain. And what our domain is candy, which is a good domain, right? Everybody's favorite. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your candy, and I want you to separate it based on the different types of candy you have. It's up to you how you want to break it down. What groups of kinds of candy do you have? You're going to split your candy up into groups. What are some of the groups of candy we would have? What's one? Yeah, like chocolate. That's one group. You're going to break it up based on their characteristics. So go ahead and separate out your candy based on the characteristics.
How many pieces of candy do we
You
have
can
to
mix
have?
yours together with your partner if you want, that's fine.
How many pieces of candy do we have to have?
I don't know however many was on your desk. You just decide what you want your groups to look like. It's up to you. And we'll talk about how you decided to break them up. Okay. How did you guys decide to split your candy? What did you split them up as?
Chocolate when they're hard candies, and then the chewy and yeah.
You put what does this go with? Okay, so you're gonna put those. Oh, you're afraid to put your candies together. Is that what it is? I get it. You don't want to share it. Okay, so they split theirs up based on chocolate, hard candy, more soft candy, and then they have their Smarties because they're more of like a powdery, kind of like a more powdery substance. So they decided to keep that separate. Okay, so now once you've broken those up into the different categories based on the types of candy you have, the different characteristics of the candy, I want you to start looking at your sheet. Your candy, listed on there is all your different candy types. And it has listed the calories and the saturated fats and the sugar. So I want you to look at your categories and decide if you might want to change your categories up a little bit based on any of those things. Like, do all the ones that have the chocolate in them, do they have about the same amount of calories, fat, sugar, or maybe some of the soft candy might be switched over to, let's say, this part with the chocolate because maybe they have the same amount of calories, fat, sugar. Do you understand what I'm saying? You're going to look at those types of things, those kind of values that each group has, and see if you need to switch them around, okay? Or look at, like, for the average. What you don't have to do the average yet. Just look at the average, the basic types of candy you have, and what basic calories, fat, and sugar we're talking about. So go ahead and do that right now. You might want to put an X next to the ones that, you know what I mean, are similar, have a similar amount of calories. And a star next to like the other ones, you know, try and match them up based on those characteristics. You're going to work with your partner. You want to work together? Can you two work together without causing problems? Maybe means no.
Yes.
All right, go over there. And your paper. You might need a piece of scratch paper, so get one out.
I don't have one.
Borrow. When we were going through this, as you were going through this, and I was talking to Bianca, and we noticed that we might need to make some changes on our categories. What did we talk about, Bianca, when I was over there? What were we talking about? About the chocolate and the Twizzlers. Remember? What did we say?
That to group them to like.
And when we grouped them, what did we decide about the chocolate and the Twizzlers? But when we were looking at it, what did we decide?
I don't know. I don't remember.
What did we say about the calories?
Oh, they have high calories.
Yeah, they were both about in the same calorie range. So as we're doing this, we first started out, we started grouping them separately, chocolate and soft candy separately, being the Twizzlers being the soft candy, right? And then Bianca and I were saying that we might have to change that. We might actually have to put the Twizzlers in with the chocolate category because based on the high calories, okay? So as we're doing this, as we're starting to group them, we're going to see that just what we thought in the beginning isn't necessarily so, that we might have to change our categories. Did anybody notice anything that they thought was odd, like any categories that they had to change or put stuff in different categories?
Wait, no, wait. I had all these two, the chocolate, to the.
You did the same thing because of the high calories?
Yeah, and they were saturated, they were pretty close too.
They were close to saturated fat. So that's, as we're talking this is what inductive reasoning is. You start out with categories, or a main domain, then we break it down into categories. But as we start breaking it down, sometimes we have to break it down a separate time because we find out what we thought, we find different characteristics or attributes that one candy had or one item had, another one that we thought went in another group might have the same characteristics. Does that kind of make sense? Does that make sense? Okay, so now what I want you to do, does everybody pretty much have their groups now where they think they should be?
Yeah.
Okay, great. What I want you to do is we're going to find the average for each of your group. The average calories, saturated fat, and sugar. So I want you to go ahead and do that quickly. Yeah, we know how to find average, right? How do we find average?
Add them all up and find out how
There
many
you
there
go.
are.
So let's get an average. Did everybody pretty much get that done, find their averages for their groups?
Yes.
Their average calories, saturated fat, and sugar, right? Okay, based on that, what kind of conclusion can we come to? This is what we're doing. We're looking at the groups we had, getting the information on them, and then we're going to make a theory or a hypothesis based on the information. So, what's your theory or hypothesis, especially with Halloween coming up and all this candy? What do you think, Katrina?
Chocolate's more fattening than the hard candy.
The chocolate is more fattening than the hard candy. Were you surprised? But what about the amount of sugar and
It had like 5 grams more sugar, and it had like almost like 100, or not, about 80 calories more than the hard, like than the lollipops, and it had and the hard candy didn't have any fat or saturated fat, and the chocolate had like 3 grams.
even the sugar was higher? I'm kind of surprised, honestly, about the sugar being higher. Because you think with the chocolate, think about it, it's made from like a milk byproduct, like the milk chocolate and the bean, the cocoa and the beans. And you would think that based on that, it wouldn't have, I would have thought, in my opinion, what surprised me is that I would have thought that the lollipops and the hard candy had a higher sugar content, but they
a
didn't.
bunch of sugar into the chocolate.
They add a bunch of sugar into the
Yeah.
chocolate.
The Whoppers is like the most unhealthy one
Yeah.
because it has the most amount of calories, fat, saturated fat, and sugar.
The Twizzlers come second.
Yeah.
Really?
Whoppers is first.
We don't have the Hershey's milk chocolate.
Okay.
But so that's kind of the idea we're coming at. This is just a real simple example that we're doing for inquiry reasoning. But you can use this for all other kinds of things in school. More complicated than this, obviously. Sometimes you use it in science. Have any of you done anything like this in science or
Not
anything?
yet.
Not yet? You haven't done any
Last year
experiments
we
and
did.
come up with, have you ever done an experiment and you had to come up with the conclusion? Or do they usually give you the conclusion and you have to prove it? Which one do they usually do?
You have to do the experiment, come up with a conclusion.
You've done that?
Yeah.
Where you
Yeah.
have to
Prove it. I haven't really done science fair.
So that's what inquiry reasoning is. It's not where somebody gives you the idea or gives you, here's the theory, here's what I want you to prove. It's not that, it's working the other way. You get the information, you gather it up, and then you have to come up with the conclusion based on that. Okay? Now sometimes, the thing about inquiry reasoning is that sometimes the conclusion you come up to may actually be false because it's based on limited information. Do you think if we added maybe more candy groups and different kinds of candy in here, we might come up with some different conclusions? Possibly, right? So that's what inquiring reasoning is. It's not a soundproof fact. It's just a theory or a hypothesis based on what you did. Okay? So now y'all get to do, what do you think you get to do now?
Eat them.